I'll get our recording started and wait for people to filter in for a bit. Shannon, did you just turn on captions and are those working?
Sorry, Eric, did you ask me if I turned something on?
Yeah, I saw someone turn on transcript. I wanted to make sure it was working.
I did not turn it on, but I can see that the recording is on.
Wonderful.
Mhm.
All right. Seeing most of the people have joined, I'm going to go ahead and get us started then. Welcome, everyone. This is the pre-bidders conference webinar for our new arrival shelters operations of city-owned, city-leased, or licensed facilities. For basic information there, this was released a couple of days ago and is due date coming up here, September 26th. We are going to go through this webinar for you. A little bit of housekeeping to get us started. And just because of the number of participants that we're going to have, everyone's going to be muted. This is webinar style. You will have access to the chat, and that is how we ask that your questions for the program team be asked. We're going to stop, I believe, midway and at least at the end to be answering questions that you might have. And any questions that either we're not 100% on, or we want to make sure we get the best clarity for you on the answer. We're going to write those down into what's called our amendment and provide an answer through the RFP portal that we're going to walk you through today. All the questions, whether they're answered here or answered in the amendment, will be on that amendment. So if there's something that you heard in the webinar that you wanted the answer to and you forgot to write it down, it's going to be on in there. We are recording. This is going to get posted on the DFSS YouTube channel as soon as we can pull the recording down and then load it back up. PDF of those these PowerPoint slides are going to be available at the URL that you can see there. This is going to take up to 5 business days. So that is the basic logistics of how we're going to get started. This is what our agenda is looking like. We're going to do quick introductions of who we are and who's talking to you here. And the program team is going to walk through information on the RFP, the background goals, current priorities, requirements, and selection. I also have a little bit of information about the site visits that are available and then our timeline. And then I'm going to come back in and walk you through the system of how to submit an application and what confirmation of that submission looks like. You'll see our RFP right there on the right. So my name is Eric Schell. I am helping shepherd the technical side of this RFP forward. And I am now going to turn over to the new arrivals team for introductions and to get us started through the slides. So maybe Danny, if you want to go ahead and get started first.
Sounds good. Thank you, Eric. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Danny Castaneda. I'm the director with the Homeless Services Division with the Department of Family and Support Services, specifically over the new arrivals response. And I'll pass it over to Shannon.
I guess it's afternoon now. Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. I'm Shannon Ghetto, one of the project managers on the Homeless Services team at DFSS, and I have been working closely with our new arrivals team on the RFP development process. And I'll pass it over to Maura.
Hello, I'm Maura McCauley, Managing Deputy Commissioner here at the Department of Family and Support Services. So I will get us moving. So overall, the goal of this RFP is to seek agencies who can operate emergency shelters at buildings that are city-owned or city-leased, that are currently being operated as shelters. Just to give a little background on the operation here, and the context for all of these shelters that are included in this RFP. Over the past year, Chicago has received over 13,500 individuals and families who have crossed over the southwest border into Texas. Many of them have been bused by the state of Texas or provided assistance with transportation via other forms of buses, planes, and they have made their way to Chicago to make their home here. So in response to this ongoing dynamic, the city has opened and continues to operate a series of new arrival emergency shelters. We currently have over 6,500 residents in these beds. Again, they are individuals and families with children. This number continues to grow as we continue to receive people every day. And so as this number of new arrivals coming to Chicago does continue to grow, and our existing shelter system is at capacity, the demand for beds outweighs the supply of available shelter beds, as everyone is aware. We currently also have upwards of 2,000 people waiting in police stations and the airport, while the city is really working with many, many partners on the ground to provide services and open new shelter facilities across the city. So the city is also actively working with the state of Illinois, the Illinois Department of Human Services, Catholic Charities, and other community-based organizations to support new arrival resettlement efforts, so that we are also focusing on pathways to housing out of shelter. And we also have partnerships with the Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights, or ICER, and their community-based partners to provide case management supports to individuals in shelters and at police stations, but this RFP is very specific to the shelters. There are other essential partnerships, including healthcare providers, the police department, and our network of mutual aid groups and volunteers who are really working to welcome and meet basic needs as we continue to improve and stabilize operations of the shelters. I'm going to turn it over to Danny, who is going to talk a little bit more about our current state and priorities and why we are issuing this RFP. And then he will also get into the nuts and bolts of what we're looking for.
Thank you, Maura. Hi again, everyone. My name is Danny Castaneda. So the goals of this RFP, first and foremost, is to continue to provide really the safe and accessible places to stay for new arrivals experiencing homelessness in Chicago. And then the city is seeking new arrival shelter operators in response to the increasing need for shelter bed capacity and the need to find more cost-effective community-based shelter operators for the longer-term management of our new arrival shelters, especially as the number of new arrivals continues to grow. And then with that, we really wanted to outline some of our priorities for improvement. So in seeking to make this transition and bring in providers to operate shelters through this RFP, the city is seeking to improve the new arrivals emergency shelter system across a variety of dimensions, which really includes investing in the local workforce and structures of care for the long-term sustainability of the overall new arrival shelter system, delivering culturally responsive services, including the integration of historical and current local community context, delivering shelter services that support holistic case management, activating additional new arrivals emergency shelters to decrease the reliance on police stations as temporary and informal shelter while new arrivals are awaiting placement, as Maura said. We have a number of new arrivals waiting at police stations for placement, so that is really a key priority for us through this RFP. Delivering shelter services that reflect the Chicago Continuum of Care's core values, housing first approach, harm reduction, and a couple of others. And then strategizing with the city, state, and community stakeholders on how to unify the new arrival system and the homeless shelter and rehousing systems that the city of Chicago already operated before new arrivals started to arrive in the city. So the target population for this RFP are households that are literally experiencing homelessness and have recently arrived to the city of Chicago from the southwest border. So for this RFP, DFSS seeks programs that can specifically meet the needs of and serve new arrivals individuals, so single adults without children, and families, which is adults with children who have come to Chicago. So adults without children can include adult families, an adult who is here with a brother or a cousin, or just single adults who are here on their own of any gender identity, and then adults with children. So this can include single parents or couples with minor children. And then our programs must practice family preservation, and then the requirement for family shelters that the household has at least one minor child, which is under the age of 18. Many new arrivals have come to the U.S. due to economic, political, and/or social turmoil in their home countries. Many who are arriving are limited or have limited English proficiency, and some have disabilities, identify as LGBTQIA+, and/or are survivors of gender-based violence. So really, we are looking to serve this full population of new arrivals in the city. And then some demographics of the new arrival population. Every year the city of Chicago is required to facilitate the point in time count, or the PIC count. This year it was conducted on January 26th, and we included all new arrival shelters were included in this count. 98% of new arrivals identify as Hispanic or Latino or Latinx, most originating from Latin American countries. The most common new arrival households identified during the PIC count were young single adult men without children. But since the count, more family households with children have arrived in Chicago. Again, the PIC count was conducted in January of this year. Our population has significantly increased since January of this year, and then we have seen a shift of families with children arriving to the city versus single adult men without children, which was the case back in January. So currently we do continue to have a high need for all household types to access shelter. And then really just wanted to give a rundown of the available facilities for the operation through this RFP. So applicants can apply to operate more than one of the facilities below. So we, have 15 shelters, our largest one serving 1,590 individual family members. Again, that's adults with minor children. And then our smallest one being the Leon Beach Park, also for families with children, but that one being for 100 individual family members. And then just wanted to highlight the program requirements for interested respondents. So the ideal respondent will be able to, first and foremost, provide a safe shelter environment that they can operate and staff 24/7. Be able to hire enough qualified staff with Spanish-speaking capabilities that reflect the needs of the population served. Best practice is a staff ratio of 1 staff to every 15 clients. Provide 3 meals a day for each resident, with lunch and dinner being a hot meal and then breakfast being a cold meal. Provide services for building maintenance and safety, so janitorial services and snow removal services in the winter. Coordinate with committed resources, partners, and service providers for new arrivals to ensure access to support services and resettlement resources. As Maura shared, there are key committed resources and partners that are currently supporting the new arrival shelter system. So we are looking for respondents that can continue to coordinate with those committed resources so that new arrivals in shelters can continue to have access to those resources. And then provide on-site services and linkages to support physical and behavioral health. Provide access to case management to ensure clients are linked to services and community resources that will help clients obtain or maintain housing. And then continue the ongoing coordination with the Emergency Operations Center to provide which provides direct oversight, collaboration, data tracking, reporting for the entire new arrival shelter system. And then for performance goals and outcomes, so DFSS seeks to track progress towards achieving the outcomes of this program and access success. DFSS anticipates updating or changing outcomes and outputs of interest, especially as the selected applicants scale up the shelter operations, and really want to emphasize that these outcomes and outputs may change, just given the dynamic, the varying dynamic of the full new arrivals mission. Things can change pretty quickly, so we, these outcomes may change. But for now, some of these performance indicators may include the average length of stay in shelter, percentage of households being referred to support services, percentage of households being referred to housing resources and stable housing, and then maintaining a 98 to 99% bed utilization rate. And then when metrics are finalized, we will monitor metrics by race, ethnicity, gender, country of origin, age, and other characteristics to track equity in outcomes and outputs. And then I will hand it over to my colleague, Shannon.
Thanks, Danny. So I'm going to continue us on kind of talking about some of the criteria that we score on. So it's the application questions that are at the start of the RFP package. There's usually about 5 sections with different questions that we'll score on. And so this is kind of broke down every slide based off of those different 5 categories. So the first one is focused on community involvement. So respondents will be able to demonstrate a variety of things, and some of those are listed here for this section. So one that's really important is having a clear understanding of the target population, including what their needs and challenges are. Respondents should be able to describe how client and community engagement activities inform service delivery for the residents and clients that they're serving. They should be able to demonstrate their commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, and access to programming in all levels of the organization's operations. And as well, their leadership and agency should reflect and engage diverse people of the communities that it serves. On the next slide, so this is an area that has a lot of points kind of associated with the application questions, and something that we think is important to understand. So kind of the strength of the program or proposed program. Danny had mentioned it's important that the shelter program reflects the core values of the Chicago Continuum of Care's kind of shelter values, so related to being using harm reduction practices, housing first, providing trauma-informed care, as well as competent, non-discriminatory, appropriate shelter practices. Respondents can also should be able to describe why they're applying for specific proposed facilities in their applications. They should be able to demonstrate how their proposed shelter policies align with the target population needs, and also following the city's standard operating guide, which is attached in Appendix B of the application package for your reference. So it's important that you're able to kind of highlight how your proposed program will align to the SOG guidance. The respondent's also able to clearly describe what services and case management supports will be provided, whether that's directly through your shelter organization or through referrals and partnerships with other community-based organizations, and how they're appropriate to addressing the needs and achieving the desired outcomes for the target population. And then respondents must also be able to describe how their proposed programs will coordinate with the city and other agencies to provide supports and services and case management. And we'll talk a little bit more about an opportunity kind of related to some of that a little bit later into this presentation. And then finally, respondents should kind of describe their effective approach to maintaining a safe shelter environment and providing reasonable accommodations to meet their clients' needs. So kind of the third criteria or category that we typically look for is kind of strength of performance and outcomes. DFSS is really committed to understanding program success through tracking of data and metrics. And so this is something that we just like to see reflected in applications from interested respondents. So one of the questions kind of is geared towards applicants showing and demonstrating that they have evidence of past performance using like data or reporting from the last 12 months if they have operated a similar program model. And if you are a new applicant and haven't operated a program under this shelter model, you can also kind of describe what you plan to do to ensure that those program goals and outcomes are being met with your proposed program. And then also applicants demonstrating that they have experience collecting and utilizing data to inform their services and program outcomes, as well as identifying and addressing inequities is important. Also respondents' ability to show how they've tracked bed utilization rates at one of their shelter facilities if they currently operate a facility. And if it is a new applicant without having formally operated a shelter facility, you can just explain how you would monitor and track those bed utilization rates over time. Also being able to kind of speak to relevant systems and processes to both track and report on performance and program outcomes, and also ways in which your organization collects and stores key participant data and performance data will be important as well. For this fourth kind of criteria grouping, we are looking for respondents who are able to demonstrate how they will staff and operate their proposed shelter system or shelter facility for the target population, providing descriptions and details of staff positions and their qualifications. So for example, some of the qualifications of staff that you might be trying to hire are if they're a clinical licensed social worker or the years of experience that they've had working with that specific target population. We also are looking for an understanding of the applicant's proposed staffing plans and staffing ratios, which has further guidance in the RFP, but we suggest a staffing ratio of about 1 staff to 15 residents, and just how you plan to meet that population's needs, whether it's like a shelter for single adults or families, et cetera. Your ability to scale up staffing within kind of the proposed timeline, and including details of hiring staff with specific Spanish speaking qualifications to support the population in need. And then a description of your adequate systems and processes in place to support monitoring of program expenditures and financial controls, and as well just having an understanding of your expertise working with the target population in terms of what capabilities and infrastructure you have in place on language supports and skills, cultural competencies, and those things to serve the needed population. Excuse me. And then finally, the fifth section is focused on kind of budget justification. And I'll get into this a little bit more on the next slide, but applicants will be required to submit both a proposed budget and a clarifying supplemental cost proposal. And one of the main questions in this section kind of relates to your proposed budgets, which is the third one here. So the respondent is able to kind of justify how the costs that they've outlined in their budgets are reasonable, and how they will be able to provide those services given those costs that are necessary for their program. And then there's also 2 questions, one about your HR policies and procedures to ensure that you can hire up for those important positions in a timely manner, and as well just kind of cash flow and fiscal capacity to expend funds prior to reimbursement. And just some additional things to keep in mind. So there's some attachments that are inserted into the application, one of which is associated with one of those kind of program outcome metric questions. You can attach data or other documentation of past performance in the last 12 months. And that is if you have kind of managed a similar program model in the past. Won't be as applicable to those who are new applicants, of course. And then, as I was saying, you'll need to attach your organization's proposed budget along with that clarifying cost proposal for each facility that you plan to apply for. And then one thing to note, so there is an opportunity for delegates to exercise the option for advanced funds. So there is an attachment of the delegate request for advanced form that's been uploaded into the system just for your reference and information. You don't need to complete the form, but it's just something that you can read through. And if you decide that you would like to exercise that option, you should indicate that in your application before you submit it, of course. And so this slide is important. There's a lot of different dates on it, and we can answer questions at the end of the presentation as well. But just wanted to kind of recap, of course, the webinar is happening today. We have some shelter facility site visits that will be coming up at the start of next week. So we have them Monday through Thursday, and I will go over that schedule a little bit later into this presentation. So they'll be kind of split into 4 days, or I guess there's 4 different days of site visits, and it's kind of split by geographic region over 2 days for each, like 2 days on the north side on Monday and Tuesday, and then 2 days on the south side on Wednesday and Thursday. So the new arrivals team with Danny will be kind of operating that to ensure that folks that are interested in going to see facilities can do so during those periods of times. And there's proposed timelines and schedules for that, so I'll show you that in momentarily. And then just as a reminder, the due date to kind of submit any follow-up questions based off of the RFP or this webinar is 1 week prior to the closure of the RFP application and e-procurement. So you'll have to submit your questions by the 19th, and then applications are due at 12 p.m. sharp on the 26th of September. And then the contract period for the program is to start up on November 1st. However, we will work with the selected applicants, surrounding that timeline, of course. And then just another interesting opportunity that our team wanted to share. So this is not related with the city's kind of meetings surrounding RFPs or our selection process, but the Illinois Office to Prevent and End Homelessness in Chicago funders together to end homelessness are hosting an interesting shelter partnership meet and greet next Monday, the 11th, from 3 to 4:30 p.m. You can RSVP by emailing the email that's provided here. By tomorrow at 12 p.m. is when it's due for your RSVP. And you can indicate the little characteristics that are noted on this slide. And it's really an opportunity for shelter providers and service providers who kind of work in the new arrival space in the city to come together and think through potential partnerships kind of surrounding this funding opportunity, since we do really want to work on creating this unified system and increase the collaborative partnerships that are going into this effort moving forward. So if you're interested in that, we encourage you to sign up. And so in terms of funding and kind of the contract period, et cetera, so the term of the current contract will be about 8 months from November 1st through the end of June in 2024. And then kind of based off of need, the availability of funding and performance of the selected applicants or contractors, DFSS may extend the term up to 6 times for about 6 months for each of those terms. And one thing to note related to the advance request form that I had spoken about in the attachment slide. So advances for administrative costs will be considered for this RFP, of course, in accordance with the city's advance payment policy. There's some more information about this in the RFP, but we just wanted to note it here. And you will need to, as I said before, indicate this in your application if you would like to exercise this option. And administrative costs will be capped at about 10%, or the agency's federally approved indirect rate for the application. So just something to keep in mind. The anticipated funding per award is based off of a bed rate range. So it's about $22 to $35 per night per bed. And of course, the funding will vary by site based off of the current bed capacity at each of those facilities. So Danny had kind of shared a table in part of his presentation that had the breakdown of the 15 facilities that are available. And there's a column there that kind of references the bed capacity at each of those facilities. So you can kind of work with that program requirements table to estimate what you think it will cost for your program to operate each of those facilities you choose to apply for. And the bed rate costs include all costs associated with staffing and operating of these shelter facilities. And just to reiterate, so under this RFP, there will be up to 15 awards that will be given, and they're based off of those facilities in that table as well. And applicants that are interested in operating multiple facilities, as Danny was saying before, should be submitting an individual application for each facility. And, we are encouraging collaborations, and collaborative applications are encouraged for this process. So just wanted to note that again. So budgets, applicants must, as I was saying, submit separate budgets, proposed budgets for each of the facilities that they're applying to based off of that bed rate range and their estimated costs. Budgets should reflect about 1 year, 12 months of services. So just keep that in mind as you're kind of going through and creating your assumptions for your budget. Cost category definitions should be attached in the budget instructions of the application. Some other things to keep in mind: try to be thoughtful and inclusive when developing your budget and apply for your program's actual proposed costs. We at DFSS cannot give you more money than what you ask for. However, we can give you less. So that's just something to keep in mind. And that reasonable cost question in the budget costs section of the application questions is kind of where you will kind of pull from your proposed budget to justify your spending and costs associated. Just some other things to keep in mind with budgets. So common mistakes we see are fringes. So just making sure that you're checking your calculations and accounting for wages, salaries, and benefits of staff. Supplies, these are sometimes either under or over budgeted for. Client assistance, if it's appropriate and an allowable cost, don't forget to include that. And then just make sure that your job description titles and the ones that you upload have the same titles. You can put a little description into the budget document itself if you don't specifically provide that description in your application or those questions. And then just make sure to put your budget in the appropriate column. So another added kind of supplemental element that actually won't be scored upon, but will be important for us to receive for each facility that you apply to, is this clarifying cost proposal. So they're required, as I was saying, and it will just really be helpful for applicants to highlight the costs associated, the estimated costs associated with providing these specific services that are highlighted in section F, of the guidance for respondents. These clarifying cost proposals won't be taken into account for scoring, like I said, but depending on the competitiveness of pricing, we may fund these costs as part of the total award for those applicants that are selected. And additionally, something to note: upon request by DFSS, applicants who do move forward with the selection process may need to provide some additional details to support the costs that you provide. I'm going to show you on the next slide what that template looks like. But essentially, we might have some follow-up questions related to how food will be provided, or how many security guards you'll have working during your different shifts, as examples. Applicants who apply for any facility, so that includes all the facilities on that table that Danny had shown earlier in the presentation, must provide monthly cost estimates for if the applicant was to provide their own meals to residents. We are requiring that at least 3 meals a day be provided to residents in the shelter facilities. And you should also provide any monthly cost estimates that will be associated with providing case management, by through your facility, or if it's through a community-based organization as well. So those are the two kind of cost categories that all applicants will have to include in the supplemental clarifying proposal. And then additionally, if you're applying for a specific city-owned or Parks District facility, you must also provide kind of those monthly estimates associated with you providing your own snow removal, garbage services, on-site security, janitorial services, and engineering and repairs. So if we go to the next slide, this is the kind of spreadsheet that's in the attachments, and it's also located under Appendix A of the application. I apologize, the text is quite small on the screen, but essentially it just kind of shows the service on the left-hand side. The next column kind of shows the breakdown of what facilities have to include which of these clarifying costs or monthly costs associated with the shelter operator being the one to provide these services. It's just a brief description in the middle column. And then the one that you'll actually be inserting your kind of monthly cost estimates into is the monthly cost column that's highlighted in yellow/orange. And then we have some formulas that will populate kind of the 12-month cost estimates and add that at the end, so you won't have to kind of get up or calculate the total annual estimated costs associated with these services. So pretty straightforward, but we just wanted to go over that for all of you in this presentation. The other things to note, so we will have those site visits coming up next week. We can also share this link in the chat at some point. So if you are interested in understanding more about the specific facilities and ones that you're interested in applying for, we do highly encourage you to RSVP and attend the site visits for the different facilities next week. So this SurveyMonkey link, if you click into it once we send that to you, you'll have just a few questions. It'll take about 3 to 4 minutes to complete, and you can just indicate your contact information, which of the sites you would like to visit based off of the schedule in that link. Things to note, each site visit should be limited to about 2 contacts per organization, and you need to try and RSVP by end of day today. So something to keep in mind that you'll want to try and RSVP by the end of day today, because we're going to work to set up and coordinate with the shelters before Monday. Next slide, please. So this is the breakdown for the first 2 days of site visits at those north side facilities. You'll see kind of the green and the blue columns highlight which of the facilities are being featured. And then if you go further over to the right-hand side, you'll see the site visit times. So those are the specific times that are already set in stone for when potential providers and interested respondents want, if you would like to go and visit those shelter facilities, that is the time that you will need to be available to visit those specific sites on the north side. And then on the next slide, we have the south side shelters. So these are for the 3rd and 4th days of site visits, and you can see that the specific shelters and their associated times are listed in both of these tables. This information is also embedded within the SurveyMonkey link, so you don't have to write this down right now. You'll have access to that when we send out the link. And then once our team has reviewed those RSVPs, we will be sending you an email confirmation just to let you know that we received your kind of RSVP and that you are confirmed to attend these site visits. And I will say our team tried to be mindful of providing enough time and windows in between the site visits for folks to be able to travel from one site to another. So we tried to account for that as best as we could and gave an hour window for each of these visits, but it might not take the full hour, which is something that you can also keep in mind for your planning purposes. And I think this is my last slide, but just a reminder that the applications are due on the 26th at 12 p.m. noon sharp. And we hope that if you have any other follow-up questions, please feel free to email Danny. His contact information is on the RFP, and there's also a hotline number that you can contact if you have any kind of technical questions or issues with the e-procurement system or platform. But we appreciate your time, and I will turn it over to Eric now.
Thanks, Shannon. We are going to get into that hotline number later on in the presentation. I will remind you all we're going to be taking questions from the chat towards the end of this presentation, and you're welcome to be adding those in now so that we can get to them later. So few tips that we wanted to give about the e-procurement system if you're new to it. The one at the top and the one at the bottom is true, and we can't say it enough. Start early, save often. If you have never been in the e-procurement system or iSupplier system before, we highly recommend that you begin the registration as soon as possible. The RFP narrative and application questions were written with extreme care and detail. So please, when going to answer those questions, the RFP is your best friend when it comes to figuring out what it is we're looking for and the kind of framing and information we need. All of the questions that you get scored on were coming and aligned from the RFP narrative itself. So that is your best resource. There is a 4,000 character limit, which does include punctuation and spaces for your responses. So just keep that in mind. It's rarely a problem, but it's something that we don't want you to get surprised with. And do not use that back button on your browser. This is definitely one of those systems where it likes you to navigate forward as opposed to trying to redo things on a previous page. The submission for single applicants should be set up through a unique user account. But all your accounts can use the same email address. What that's saying is you can, if you're applying as like one applicant, you just want to use that one account. You should not create two accounts for one single application. The e-procurement system is not capable of submitting more than one distinct proposal associated with email address. So note that a separate email address is required for each substantial proposal. You need to submit your application. And if you need to amend it, you can do so all the way up through the due date of September 26th at 12 noon. Always, we recommend to not submit within the kind of final 10 minutes up to that noon deadline. This is very generous, but plan on each submission taking you a minimum of an hour. We're not going to be able to accept late applications so that we can kind of get to the scoring, review, and award process as soon as possible for us. Here's that hotline number that Shannon previewed for you. For those of you who are reading the transcript or who want it said twice, that number is 312-744-4357. And that last little bit there would be 312-744-HELP. That takes you to information about any questions you might have about e-procurement. And that hotline is operating just towards normal business hours. That's Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. And then you'll see our favorite advice there, save often, submit early. For new agencies, you're going to need to provide articles of incorporation as well as any amended articles of incorporation. This is alongside of your application. So in addition, your IRS affirmation number, those are for nonprofit agencies only. That date, that letter from the affirmation letter must be 60 days from submission. And then there's your IRS number if you need help obtaining that. That's 877-829-5500. If you're a for-profit agency, you're going to be submitting your FEIN number. You're also going to need your DUNS number, your DUNS number, essential contractor registration, that's CCR, and then your certificate of good standing with the state of Illinois. Here's our information about technical assistance on our DFSS webpage. You're going to see a link to the RFP as well as training documents on the alert section as well. That's where this information on this webinar is also going to end up. For questions on registration, e-procurement, there's that phone number again, but also you can contact this email address. That's customer support, cityofchicago.org, and then those training materials as well. As I said before, we're going to be answering questions later, and then the answers to those questions are going to show up in what's called an amendment. You do need to accept the amendment in order for your submission to be finalized. So let's say you've submitted an application already. You will need to accept the amendment once it's posted. If you have not submitted your application already, then you can do both at the same time, but we're going to walk you through step by step on what accepting an amendment looks like. So first, in order to start an application, you're going to have to acknowledge and accept the amendment. That's if you haven't done so already. To accept the amendment, you're going to click View Amendment History. That's that red circle off to the left. You'll see it's got a nice big warning on there that says this RFP has been amended. If the RFP has not been amended yet, you can select Create Quote. That's there, that big circle, red circle on the right. This is going to take you to the application page where you can get started. Beginning the acceptance and the acknowledgement process, you're going to open the RFP and click that document number. Again, that's red circle on the left that has the number 1 next to it. To review amended changes, that's going to be on the eyeglass or infinity icon. That's number 2, red circle on the right. And then acknowledging receipt and understanding of these changes, you're going to click the Acknowledge Amendments button. That's red circle number 3. By acknowledging the amendment, you're indicating that you're aware that changes were made to the RFP in the amendment. When you get to this screen, and this is what it looks like, you're clicking the I accept checkbox that's on the left, and then clicking Acknowledge on the right to confirm. This is your standard acceptance of terms. It looks very similar to when you're accepting a terms of service for any application online. Click on Yes indicates that you acknowledge the amendment. You'll notice this is asking you twice to confirm your acknowledgement. That's just for us being thorough. And then you're doing it again, accepting the accepted terms and conditions and clicking in the upper right. This is the final step of acknowledgement. So that's 3 acknowledgement steps there that you'll be going through. Finally, we have submitting an application. Fairly straightforward. When you're ready to submit, you start by saving your draft one final time. So this Save Draft button is going to be your best friend. This is what we're talking about when we say save often. That's the button that you click. When you're ready to submit, go ahead and click it one last time, and then you're going to move on to continue. You're going to see an example of what this page looks like. If you're missing any information, you're going to get an error message. It's going to show you there on the upper left that an error has been occurred, and it's going to do its best to tell you what issues it's encountering that's stopping it from finishing that application. And then at that point, you can go back through your application, navigate to the page it's looking for, and fill out the information that's missing. Like I said, those error messages are typically something that's missed or that's empty in the application. In the final example here, a message indicates that lines have not entirely been filled out. And so you just navigate over to the little lines tab and you're going to fill those out. Here's an example of an unanswered question. So in the question that you are required to answer, for example, the one that you see here, you didn't fill out your first name. You're going over to the quote value and you're going to fill out your first name, right? So you'll see here how the flow of here's your error. This is the thing that's wrong. You go to the thing that's wrong. You fill that in. Once your application is free from errors, it's going to let you submit and proceed. Clicking continue at that point should put you in the review and submit phase. The easiest way to tell that you don't have an error is look at your quote number and see that it says review and submit as opposed to an error message. It's then going to give you all the information you filled in. This is going to be your last chance to confirm that all that information is correct. Please do give that one look over. I know you just spent a bunch of time filling it all out, but this would be the time where, you know, getting your phone number correct or anything that we might need to contact you with is extraordinarily important. At the bottom of the screen there, it's going to say you're going to provide an electronic signature to affirm that all of this information is correct. This is the same as signing a piece of paper with a date on it that says, yes, I approve of all this information. You click that X, you fill out your name, and then you go ahead and go down to the bottom right there and you click the submit button. This is the screen that you're going to see when your submission is accepted. The e-procurement system is going to send you a confirmation email within 24 hours. So you're going to see this screen first. It's going to have that nice little green check mark. And then if you're wanting to be extra sure, you're going to get an automated email within 24 hours. You can go ahead and call my information or email me to make sure that that's gone through if you like, or you can wait for that confirmation email. So now's the point in which we're going to look at the chat and take questions. I'm going to see, yeah, if I can get these questions up myself. How we're going to do this is I'm going to go through the questions in order, and then the program team, I'm going to give it over to the program team to answer. If they feel like they need a little extra time or they want to answer it in the amendment, they can just let us know. We're going to answer that in the amendment. I'm going to start with the Q&A here. First thing that I'm seeing is, hello, will this recording be shared after? Yes, it will. It will be on the DFSS YouTube page. Next question here. The 1 to 15 staff to client ratio is per all shifts. And is that correct? I will turn it over to the program team for that one. I can repeat if need be.
Yeah, there's hi everyone, this is Danny. There's a couple questions on this. I think one of them is specifically asking if it's per shift or per the overall census. I think we will answer this more explicitly through the amendment. I don't want to answer it incorrectly now. So we'll explicitly answer that in the amendment.
Sounds good, Danny. Thank you. Next question. Will the awardee fill, quote, staff-based staff roles as listed on the RFP page 59 under favorite? Or will the awardee potentially take over all staff roles listed on pages 59 through 63? Anyone on the program team?
So this is Maura. The positions referenced, I think on pages 59, are our current staffing positions. And then we get into other positions that are helping to support the mission. So that actually gives you an idea of how the shelters are staffed. We're seeking applicants to propose how you would staff all of the shelter roles. Any positions that are based out of DFSS or out of other parts of the city operations are not included in this RFP.
Thank you, Maura. Next question. Does the city intend to use only NGOs in the execution of the mission, or are for-profit entities eligible to win award? If so, do the exclusions regarding profit and markup apply?
So, I mean, any for-profit entities are eligible to submit applications. I think we will need to get back to you on the, we will have to add the exclusions response in the amendment to make sure we get that correct. But I do want to highlight when Shannon went over the emphasis on partnerships and selection criteria, really heavily focusing on local community-based providers. I think for all applicants, thinking through that piece is really critical. And I think as you think through your applications, also revisit the goals of the RFP, which are obviously can be fulfilled by a for-profit entity. But we want to make sure that the local workforce and connections to community-based partners are a big part of this as well.
Okay. Thanks, Maura. Next question, with the ratio being 1 to 15, on the bigger sites, is there a chance of increasing the room rate at all? Anyone on the program team?
Sorry, I was struggling to come off mute. I would say no. We would need to remain within the range that is listed in the RFP.
Thank you, Danny. Next question, does DFSS require the 1 to 15 staff to client ratio for each hour of coverage at the site? Or is the ratio to be applied to the total number of staff hired for the project divided by the census of the site? Danny, you commented on this earlier. Did you want to just say again for the amendment?
Yep, we will clarify this this piece in the amendment for sure.
Sure. Okay, next question. Will a bond or letter of credit be required at time of proposal submission? And if yes, how much?
We can clarify, we can answer that in the amendment as well.
Okay. Thank you, Danny. Next question, if you choose to use the city's selected food vendor for meals, should that be included in the budget?
Respondents should include their proposed meal cost in the budget that they submit with the proposal. And then depending on the cost, we may go with the respondent's proposed meal program, or we may provide a link to our current meal provider.
Okay. Next question. Does the city intend to use only NGOs? This is the same question as before. I'm pretty sure it's an identical question. Next question then, if we don't get a shelter, can we apply for providing meals separately?
Yes, we will be issuing a separate RFP for meals in the near future. So you can register on the city's procurement website to get updates when new opportunities are released, and we can include that link in the amendment as well.
Thank you, Maura. Next question, will this deck be shared with attendees of this webinar? The answer is yes. That information, the pages mentioned before earlier in this deck, as well as the recording will be shared. I'm going to see about both sending the deck out or sending those links out directly through the Zoom Zoom platform, but it will also be on the webpage as discussed earlier. Next question for the program staff: is the awardee expected to staff medical personnel? And if so, what licenses and credentials are required for staff conducting services?
No, respondents would not be expected, or awardees would not be expected to staff medical personnel.
Okay. Thank you, Danny. Next question here. Would awardee work with current population or new arrivals?
For this RFP, the awardee would be serving new arrivals, either current new arrivals already in shelter or new arrivals that arrive after the award and are intake that at their shelter, but new arrivals only.
Thank you. Next question, just like the bed estimate cost, is there estimate ranges for any other categories such as meals, security, or other staff positions?
So I believe it's under section F of guidance for respondents. There is kind of an estimated cost associated with each meal per resident that we provided under there. However, we didn't provide other estimate ranges for security and staff positions, but we can potentially get back to you in the amendment if we have additional information surrounding that.
Yeah, and I would just clarify that when we say the cost per bed per day, that's inclusive. That includes all of the operations, meals, security, and staffing kind of rolled up into that cost.
Thanks, Shannon and Maura. Next question here. Are the shelters all non-congregate facilities, or are there some congregate facilities?
All of the shelters are congregate facilities. There are some that are less congregate, but all of the shelters are congregate facilities. By less congregate, I mean some facilities have spaces with 4 to 8 individuals, while some facilities may be a large sort of gym-like setting that has several dozen individuals or families in the same space. So all of them are congregate, though some are less congregate than others.
Thanks, Danny. Next question here. Can a medical team be included in the proposed site management?
I would say yes. They should still be incorporated, within the allotted bed rate range. And I would say that there is an expectation that awardees would be working with committed resources for new arrivals, which does include our healthcare providers that are providing on-site acute care. So that would be an expectation, but yes, if a medical team can be included in the proposed site.
Great, thank you. Next question, will the awardee operate the current shelters, or is there a possibility the awardee will be requested to procure/activate additional sites?
This RFP is to operate current shelters. There is language included in the RFP that applicants that are awarded contracts under this RFP would be given the opportunity to build on future sites that the city owns or leases and identifies. So those are the 2 areas of focus for this particular RFP.
Thanks, Maura. Next question, is there a maximum length of stay for shelter guests?
There is not currently a maximum length of stay for shelter guests. The city is actively evaluating establishing a maximum length of stay, but that's still very much in discussion. So currently there is not a maximum length of stay.
Thank you, Danny. Can we apply to provide, next question is, can we apply to provide staffing services to shelter programs separately?
We can clarify this in the amendment.
Okay.
I think maybe if there could be like a clarification of that question as well, just so we can make sure we're answering the question directly.
Yeah, so this was sent in anonymously. Whoever wrote that question, if you're still in the webinar and want to, or could possibly clarify, maybe who the we apply refers to, as well as the definition of separately there. Next question, is this RFP in response to inadequate staffing or underperforming staff at current locations? Who is currently running the shelters? And do you anticipate any additional shelters being added to this list?
So this, I think Danny nicely outlined the goals of this RFP. Really the goal, which are really to focus on, opportunities for local workforce, increasing partnerships throughout the city. And so that is really the thrust of the reason for this RFP, not necessarily underperformance. We, as I mentioned at the beginning, we are actively looking for new facilities. And so after this RFP closes, there is a likelihood that we may put out requests to the pool of selected applicants to see if they would like to bid for additional shelters. There will not be additional shelters added to this list during the RFP phase. The 15 shelters on this list are the shelters that are the focus of this bid.
Thanks, Maura. Next question here, the per bed per night cost. That is, I believe, a statement. The per bed per night cost covers the total operational expense for the facility. If that was meant to be a question, someone please go ahead and rewrite that as a question if it hasn't quite been answered yet for you. Next question, will the city be managing the leasing process for any extensions of leases for the shelter spaces?
Yes, at this time, the agreements are handled by the city, and it will not be it won't be the expectation of the selected applicants to handle those at this point in time.
Okay. Two questions left as it currently stands. So if you have questions, please get them in now as we're about to wrap up. Next question here, regarding the quote person in charge with food manager certification, end quote, do they need to be on site 24/7 or is during meal times sufficient?
We can answer that in the amendment.
Sure thing. Next question, how does the extension process look like? Is there a process we have to go through, or is an extension be awarded based on performance and metrics met according to the RFP?
really it's going to be based on the extension process will be, looked at globally across the shelter system to determine, do we have a continued need for this level of beds for the beds at a particular shelter? There's not a formal application process for an extension, but we would be, working in collaboration with, partners at each shelter to talk through the likelihood of an extension and the terms of extension in advance, so that you understand and know what would be required to either continue or to ramp down.
Thanks, Maura. Next question, will the awardee be contributing or determining policies, procedures, and practices in order to ensure Chicago Continuum of Care core values are applied?
We have established a standard operating guide for our shelters. And we use a consistent one across all shelter facilities, which for the near future we will continue to do, but it is a living document. And, we do make adjustments in coordination with all of the various partners. So I think there's definitely an opportunity for selected shelter operating partners to contribute to, how those policies and procedures evolve going forward.
All right. Next question, does the $22 to $35 allotment for per bed per night cover expenses for operating the facility?
That is the rate. That is the range for the operations of the facility that the city is prepared to pay per bed per night.
Next question. What role is the awardee expected to play in the coordination of resettlement efforts?
Yeah, so the role that awardees are expected to play in resettlement efforts is really, a coordination partner, really providing access to the resettlement partners to the facility that you are operating. But it really is mostly, providing access to the facility and then working with those partners to ensure that they're able to carry out their resettlement work on site and in working with your residents.
Next question here for budgeting. Do we have to provide the exact amount we are requesting in number of staff, or is the dollar amount per bed acceptable?
Yes, we gave the 22 to 35 dollars per bed per night just as a range to give applicants kind of the range of funding you could expect at the lower and higher end to be awarded. But it is in the application there are questions about your staffing patterns where you would have to include the number of staff. And there is a standard, DFSS budget form that will need to be completed where you will outline, the positions that would be paid for in part or in full by this funding, as well as your different operating costs, which would give us the total request. So in the proposal, you do not need to break it down into the cost per bed. That is really, we will do that on the back end, but that's really just a guide around the parameters of funding that we are awarding under this opportunity.
Next question here. Is there a meal requirement, type or etc., for each category of breakfast, lunch, dinner? And if that's within the 35 budget, it's very tight overall cost for meals alone.
So I believe we provided that there need to be at least 2 hot meals within the RFP, which were for lunch and for dinner. And the associated cost for our other shelters currently for 1 meal per resident is about $3.30. So based off of those estimates of the current costs with our other general Chicago shelters, that was how we kind of came up with that guidance. However, as we kind of stated, you should try and, your proposed costs, you should try and make that based on what you think it will actually cost your organization or the estimated costs associated with that operation. And, we will keep that in mind, and it's helpful information for us to have.
Next question here, just confirming site visits are recommended, but not required to submit an application.
Correct. Site visits are not required to submit an application, though they are highly encouraged and recommended if you're applying for a site that you may not be familiar with, but otherwise they are not required.
Next question, when will applicants be informed if they have been awarded? Just trying to figure out how much time there is to ramp up staffing for November 1st start date.
We can clarify that in the amendment.
Sure thing. Next question, outside of the Latinx population, what are some of the highest countries of origin you believe you will serve at shelters?
This is a little bit more anecdotal. I don't have numbers in front of me, but we have seen an increase in new arrivals from Haiti in the last couple of weeks. But it's still the vast majority of new arrivals are arriving from Latin American countries.
Next question, does the awardee need to use and maintain existing databases? Salamander, SharePoint, Smartsheet.
Yes.
So I muted myself again. That's some of that guidance is provided in the data and reporting section of the RFP, if you're curious to kind of look there.
Thank you, Shannon. Next question, are the sites have fully equipped kitchens?
No. So we aren't currently preparing meals on site. So I believe none of the sites actually have fully equipped kitchens.
Danny? Not last question. Is the budget of approximately 22 to 35 all inclusive? Administrative costs, staff, utilities, food, transportation, etc.
Yes.
Thank you. Beside those already mentioned, are there any other challenges you have not mentioned yet that you would like to solve with the new awardee?
None that come to mind currently. I think the ones that we've mentioned are really the priorities for us. No additional challenges to name.
Alrighty. Next vendor, or next question, will vendors be required to provide supplies?
So part of the RFP is, the ongoing coordination with the EOC, which would come with the, we have a logistics team at the EOC, the Emergency Operations Center, which would continue to provide the essential shelter supplies.
All right.
But I do think things like office supplies, bedding, a lot of there's, some of the sites have cots, with blankets and pillows, and some sites have bunk beds, with actual sheets. We are seeking applicants to propose things like laundry detergent if laundry is provided on site, shampoo, like hygiene items and things like that. So there are, some supplies that are provided by the Emergency Operations Center, but basically like the general things that would be required to, to serve people in a residential setting, you should propose in your budget.
And then last question I'm seeing here. Nope, one was just added, never mind. Question, who handles emergencies like water leaks or no heat, etc.?
That's really going to depend on the site. And I think that's what some of this is included in the cost proposal, to make a determination for each site who will do that. Some of the facilities have, that we lease have a property manager, and some of the city facilities have, city vendors or contractors that will provide some of that information. But I think in the cost proposal, and Shannon, keep me honest, there are some requests to address how you would handle those pieces as well. And then that would get decided at the time of contract.
And if you're curious to kind of see for the different facilities, if it's like a parks facility or a leased facility, et cetera, under the program requirements, we kind of outline which of those services may be kind of provided by a city entity or another agency, as Maura was saying. So if you would like to kind of see the breakdown of that, there's more detail there.
Next question, are we able to use current partners to continue handling meals? Or is it recommended that we create new contacts and or partnerships for meals?
Respondents should propose their own meal program, and then depending on the submitted proposal, we may go with your proposed meal program, or we may be able to continue with our current meal provider, or the new meal providers that will be awarded from the meals RFP that will be coming out soon.
All right. Is there a list of supplies not provided by EOC?
We can work on providing that list through the amendment.
You mentioned some sites had cots. Should we consider cost for furniture?
No, the sites that have cots will continue to have cots, and the sites that have bunk beds, the furniture is provided by the property manager, so those items, would continue to be replaced by the city or the property manager.
Thank you. Is there a breakdown of number of floors per site?
There will be. We are, with the amendment, we'll be submitting a shelter profiles document, which will include the number of floors at each location.
Okay. Do all sites have space for case managers and community partners to visit? Parking for staff and visitors?
The short answer is that no, not all sites have space, or at least clear designated space. Every site is very different. But we can include some of, especially the parking for staff and visitors, that will be included in the shelter profiles document that will be released with the amendment. And we can make sure to include what spaces are available for case managers and or community partners to be on site.
And I'm just going to put a plug in for site visits. I think these are the exact considerations, that having a visual and really understanding the facility and the availability of some of these amenities, I think will really help in the design of proposals.
So I just wanted to show this final slide here of Danny and my email address as we kind of begin to wrap up here. See, we have one more question that's come in, but I just wanted to make sure that everyone had the time to write these email addresses down. It would be best if you included both of us on questions, but if you have program specific ones, those are best answered by Danny, and non-program questions can come to me. 2 more questions popped up, and then we'll see where we're at. Are shelters weather ready for winter?
Yes, and if they are not, they will be by winter.
And then final question here, which entity currently handles staffing for existing shelter programs? And will the awardee be required to work with existing staff provider?
All of our new arrival shelters are currently staffed through favored staffing. If you respondents to this RFP would be expected to staff their own employees and would not be working with their existing staffing provider.
All right. Thank you all for attending this webinar. You can feel free to submit more questions to us before the amendment. They'll be included. Keep an eye out for that amendment as you're completing your application. And that should be it for us today. Thank you all for coming, and have a good rest of your Thursday.